Hello everyone, my name is Megan and welcome back to my channel. We talked about good luck charms last week and I mentioned the four-leaf clover. This week, since we are coming up on the feast day, we're going to talk a little bit about St. Patrick, the patron saint of Ireland. Now there is, as always, more to the story than what we think we know. So today we're going to talk about who he was, a little bit about his feast day, and the fact that there are two sides to the story, the Christian side and the pagan side. Now there are some pagans who absolutely hate St. Patrick and they refuse to celebrate his feast day, which is well within their right to do so. Then you have people in the United States who, if you saw from the video clip last week, use St. Patrick's Day as an excuse to turn entire rivers green and drink green beer and run around and pinch people that aren't wearing green. Now we know what he did. That much is mostly true and mostly accessible. He wrote a book, I guess. I don't know if I would call it a book, but it is his confession where he detailed parts of his life. You can actually read a translation of his confession online. It was originally written in Latin. I will leave a link in the description below to where I read my copy. I got it on Scribe. If you use the link in the description, you get 2 free months of Scribe. Use at your own discretion if that's what you want. I'm sure if you just type into Google the Confessions of St. Patrick, many different translations will be available online. Anyway, we can start with who he was. As always, all of my sources for the information will be in the description below. Highly recommend that you check out the sources for yourself and form your own opinions. And I want to make it very clear, I am not a scholar on this subject. There are people out there who have studied St. Patrick and his life and the things that he supposedly did or did not do. I am not one of those people. I simply researched it for this video and for my own knowledge, and I do absolutely suggest that you do the same. Now, the introduction of the translated version of St. Patrick's Confession has a section on his life and details some of his preaching. And without getting too deep into his confession, because honestly it's a little difficult to read, I want to talk about a few different things and mention a few things that I learned and that you might find helpful simply from St. Patrick's Confession. St. Patrick was supposedly born in 372 CE, Common Era, in a province in Britain. This year is generally agreed upon among scholars, so I'm fairly comfortable saying that St. Patrick was born in the year 372. Now, St. Patrick supposedly came from a religious family. His father was a deacon, his grandfather was a priest, and his great-grandfather was a deacon. Now, it's said that St. Patrick was captured along with several other men along the British coast by Irish pirates. From there, Patrick was sold into slavery in Ireland, and he was sold to 4 brothers, one of which who employed Patrick as a shepherd, and there he spent 6 years of his life as a slaved shepherd. It was during his enslavement that he grew closer to God and grew stronger in his faith. He said, quote, "In a single day I have said as many as 100 prayers, and in the night almost as many." Now what's funny to me is that though he came from a religious family, his father, grandfather, and great-grandfather all being men of God, Patrick himself even points out in his confession that he wasn't always a man of God and that as a teenager he even questioned his faith. He brings it up as a point of shame because someone had basically used that against him. Now while he was still enslaved in Ireland, he dreamt that he would soon be returning to his home country. A voice told him that he needed to fast and eventually he would go home. Now he says that later he had another dream where this same voice told him that his ship was ready and it was some like 200 miles away from where he was. So he escaped and he fled his captors and went looking for the ship. Now he eventually found the ship. And when he approached the captain, I'm assuming, of the ship, he was turned away. They basically said, "No, we're not going to take you. Like, we don't care." And he turned and he walked away, and he said that as he was walking, he started praying to God, and then all of a sudden the people from the ship called him back and said, yes, of course, we will take you home, let's go. And then he went home. So that's pretty much the basic story of St. Patrick and his early life before he went to Ireland with the intent of converting the Irish, who were pagan at the time, to Christianity. Now, the main thing St. Patrick is credited for is the conversion of the Irish people from their pagan beliefs to Christianity. He claims that in a dream, he received a letter from a man named Victor, who he had known from his time as a slave in Ireland. He said the beginning of the letter claims to have started with the voice of the people of Ireland, and in this letter, he heard them calling him back. I think he said that the voices that he heard were saying, like, we entreat thee, O holy youth, to come and walk still among us, I think is what he said. After he got this letter in a dream, Patrick went to Gaul and became a bishop, and basically made it his life's mission to go to Ireland and convert the people of Ireland. I want to note here that in my research, I found out that Patrick wasn't the first bishop to go to Ireland, and there were already Christians living in Ireland at the time. So I just find that odd, that he's given the credit for converting the people of Ireland, but he wasn't the first bishop there, and there were already Christians living in Ireland. Patrick says that he used his knowledge of the Irish language and the Irish belief system, which he had learned from his time as a slave, to slowly convert the Irish people to Christianity. It's said that he used the shamrock to teach the Druids and Irish people of Christianity and the Trinity, likening it to the triple deity aspect that is fairly common amongst several Irish deities. Now, on a website called Catholicism Pure and Simple, they tell a couple of stories about Patrick using the shamrock to teach the Irish about the Trinity and the spirit, pretty much, of Catholicism. And this website quotes a book called Butler's Lives of the Saints. Now, one of these legends that is on this website tells the story of how Patrick was traveling and he came upon some Druids or Irish chieftains in a field, basically, and was talking to them about the Trinity, and they were curious and they asked for an explanation. So what Patrick did is he picked up a shamrock or a clover and used the clover to explain how the three parts of the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, were part of the one supreme being. And that's where I think the shamrock or the clover comes into play a lot with the story of St. Patrick and how it's come to be associated with St. Patrick's Day, is that there are so many legends that say that St. Patrick used the clover or the shamrock to teach the Druids and teach the ancient Irish people about the Trinity and about the idea and concept of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit in Christianity and Catholicism. Now, I have my own thoughts and opinions on Christian missionary work and how it can lead to cultural genocide, whether intentional or not. I'm not claiming to know the intention behind all mission work, but in my experience, mission work does more harm than good for the cultures that these missionaries are going to. But St. Patrick is credited with, quote, driving the snakes out of Ireland, which is not true in a literal sense and might not even be true in a metaphorical sense. Now, first off, we can't take this literally. St. Patrick cannot be credited for literally driving snakes out of Ireland because snakes aren't part of Ireland's natural ecosystem. The Ice Age took care of that. There are no snakes naturally in Ireland. But then is it meant to be taken symbolically? Are the snakes supposed to be a representation of paganism and the Druids that St. Patrick converted? Honestly, that might not even be the case either. The story of St. Patrick driving the snakes out of Ireland isn't even part of St. Patrick's original mythology, we'll call it, his original stories. That came much later. In an article on Pathos titled St. Patrick, Druids, Snakes, and Popular Myths, there is a quote in there by Morgan Daimler, who is a Celtic Reconstructionist and author of so many different Irish-focused books. Morgan Daimler is quoted as saying the following: "The earliest reference they have found to anyone thinking the snakes meant Druids is in the fairy faith in Celtic countries from 1911, where someone states that he believes, based on a story, that because a certain place was where the Druids' last stronghold was, and also the place St. Patrick drove the snakes, that the snakes must represent the Druids. But it's faulty logic." So St. Patrick's Day became a feast day several centuries after his death, and St. Patrick's Day is celebrated on March 17th in many parts of the world. And March 17th is thought to be the day that St. Patrick died. So whether you're on the Christian side, who credits St. Patrick for bringing the word of Christ and God to Ireland, or you're on the pagan side, who see his myths and stories and histories as dangerous and slightly irritating, we can't really deny that St. Patrick's Day today has grown to be a celebration of Irish culture and heritage in many different parts of the world. Now, I will admit that in doing my research for this video, I learned some things that I didn't know about St. Patrick before. I didn't know that he wasn't the first bishop in Ireland. I didn't know, honestly, that the idea that he drove snakes out of Ireland didn't come until many years after his death. And I also didn't know that he had been captured and enslaved. And I don't know if the story of St. Patrick driving the snakes out of Ireland is ever going to die, or if we're ever going to find out with absolute certainty what the truth is and where that came from. But is it a good metaphor for the story behind St. Patrick? Possibly, but it's not one that's historically accurate. And I don't know if the driving out of snakes was meant to be taken as St. Patrick killing the Druids, or if it was just the dying out of paganism as Christianity slowly took over. There are even people out there who question the entirety of the story of St. Patrick and what he did. And I'm not here to tell anyone what to believe or, where to get their stories from as far as St. Patrick goes. There are so many good resources out there on the history of St. Patrick. Some of them are behind a paywall, which eventually I would like to take Laura O'Brien's class on St. Patrick. I just can't right now. So let me know in the comments below if you celebrate St. Patrick's Day. Will you be wearing green and taking part in any festivities? Is there something that you learned from this video, or is there something that I got completely wrong that you have another source for? I'd love it if you could link any other sources that you have if I got something wrong, and I will add them to the description. Whether you celebrate St. Patrick's Day or not, it still is a celebration now of Irish culture and heritage, and if you do take part in any festivities, please be safe and wear green, and I will talk to you next time.